And a recap of our top story this hour. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has made a call to suspend Myanmar from ASEAN for now, and urging Thailand as well to play a bigger role to stabilise the situation in the country. Mr. Anwar made those comments as he conducted his first bilateral meeting with Thai counterpart Prayut Chan-o-cha in Bangkok on Thursday. The Thai government has been under fire for maintaining normal ties with Myanmar's military government since it staged a coup 2 years ago, plunging the country into political and humanitarian crisis. On this, we're joined now by Sharon Seah. She's a coordinator at ASEAN Studies Centre at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute. Ms. Seah, let's start with that slightly eyebrow-raising comment by Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, suggesting that Myanmar be temporarily suspended from ASEAN because ASEAN is making no progress on its peace plan. Of course, we have reached out to the Prime Minister's office to ask for clarification and confirmation. But should that be Malaysia's official position, would this matter to the Myanmar government, which, let's say, historically has greater preference for its own company above any others?
Hi, Sue. So I think Myanmar has had a very long and troubled history, and there were long periods of isolation. And this is something that they're comfortable with. So even if you push Myanmar out, it wouldn't even matter to them. And the last 10 to 15 years, when Myanmar was open and engaging with the international community, this might be an aberration, you know. So I think that it would not be a good move. I think ASEAN should continue engaging with Myanmar.
All right. If ASEAN can do relatively little to put pressure on Myanmar, could its neighbour, that's Thailand, which shares a large boundary with Myanmar, and therefore Thailand has vested interest in not letting a state on its doorstep become a failed state, could Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha himself, coming to power from a military coup, be expected? Is there any situation in which he might be able to put or be prepared to put any kind of pressure on the Myanmar government right now?
I think the pain of not doing anything is much larger for Thailand than for the rest of ASEAN, because they share some 2,400 kilometers of borders. And they know full well that if you don't do anything and you have a failed state, like you mentioned, they are going to deal with an exodus of refugees. It's something that you can't afford. And for Prime Minister Anwar, his country is also hosting some 150,000 refugees, and that is costing the state something, right? So there is no option to not do anything for the neighbors, the immediate neighbors next to Myanmar. And within the larger region, it is also our interest to ensure that Myanmar does not fail. ASEAN has vested interest in Myanmar not failing, also because it's seen as a reflection on so-called ASEAN centrality. Of course, Mr. Anwar Ibrahim saying ASEAN needs coherent and concerted action on Myanmar. We are not actually seeing it. If we look at Thailand itself, December last year, we saw that regional talks that involved Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, but not including the maritime ASEAN states. Was that exclusion significant at that point? What can Thailand do to fix this idea that Thailand is not on board on ASEAN centrality on Myanmar? I understand that all the ASEAN countries were invited, so it's not deliberate exclusion. And there has been nothing heard out from those talks that Thailand held with the other Mekong countries together with Myanmar. It would be nice to hear what plans or what other strategies Thailand can think of to, resolve this crisis. And what was very curious was that at last week's ASEAN ministerial retreat, what we hear coming out from that meeting was there were these 2 paragraphs about Myanmar, which were really underwhelming because it just repeated everything we already know. But what was really curious was that the Indonesian foreign minister has been emphasizing on, ASEAN taking a united approach. So this seems to be telling the rest of us observers that there might be a divergence right now in the approach between the continental and the maritime ASEAN countries.
All right. Let's look ahead now. Moving on for what could happen in ASEAN. Of course, the Myanmar government is proposing in August this year that they hold elections. That's their way of telling ASEAN, you see, we are making some progress on having a diplomatic and democratic solution to the crisis that's ongoing right now. ASEAN needs to think ahead and work out what it wants to do about these elections? Does it want to recognize it? Does it want to recognize the result of these elections? Should it get buy-in from, say, Aung San Suu Kyi? What do you think ASEAN should be doing on these August elections?
ASEAN should definitely be thinking ahead of its response to these elections. And certainly if there were buy-in and inclusiveness from all parties in the country to take part in those elections, I see no reason why ASEAN shouldn't be in some way involved in ensuring that those elections are free and fair and can satisfy the will of the people of Myanmar.
All right, thanks so much for joining us. Sharon Seah, coordinator at ASEAN Studies Centre at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute.